Cycling is really popular in my district, and it's been an advocacy group that I've been a part of for a long time.
Welcome to Climate Check, Stories and Solutions for Fighting Climate Change. We are part of 350 Brooklyn, an organization that strives to counter the climate crisis through local action.
Today's episode is more of our conversation between Eva and New York State Assembly member Emily Gallagher. They discussed the Newtown Creek Superfund site, the Water Bill Fairness Act, and the Clean Rebate Program for electric bikes and scooters. Emily also gives us a quick Civics 101 on how such bills get passed.
Hi, Emily. Can you briefly, for our listeners, describe what a Superfund site is?
Sure. So a Superfund site is a designation from the federal government that an area has been so disastrously polluted by an industry that the federal government actually takes over, trying to sue the corporations who are held accountable for that pollution. And it can be historic pollution. And many of them are also sites that have military history. So in my district, we actually have multiple Superfund sites, which is exceptional.
In not a good way. This is a good time to talk about the bill that you sponsor. It's A4019 about charging for sewage runoff. So what you're saying about Superfund sites, and we haven't talked about how it affects your community where you live and your constituency. Can you briefly tell us about this?
Yes, I'm really glad that you're connecting that, because my district is home to Newtown Creek, which is our federal Superfund site. It used to be known as the Little Mississippi of the North, and it had a number of critical industries for the economy of the 1800s, including oil refining, bone boiling, all sorts of glue factories, really kind of gross, toxic processes that resulted, especially with the oil refining, in millions of gallons of oil seeping into the ground and into the water of Newtown Creek. And my community fought extremely hard on and off for over 100 years, but most critically from the 1990s on, to have that designated and to hold Exxon accountable for that. And one of the interesting pieces about Newtown Creek is that it is an estuary, which means that instead of water flowing in and out with the tide, it actually goes up and down like a bathtub, and all the pollution is kind of stuck at the bottom.
Oh boy. So New York doesn't have a separate sewer storm system, right?
Right. The water system that we have has all pathways of wastewater going together. So that includes stormwater, but it also includes discharge from homes. So it all goes to wastewater treatment plants, ideally. But when we have one of these overflow events where the storm sewers get overwhelmed, then that doesn't end up going to the wastewater. It just goes directly into the community. So that's from flushing toilets, that's from runoff from parking lots and all this sort of thing.
Does this bill, A4019, does this directly affect these Superfund sites? Are there still businesses, factories, corporations from the past that are responsible for is it considered sewage, this runoff?
So one of the reasons I was explaining how the creek works is that we have all of our sewer systems hooked up to that area. And that means that when we are discharging sewage, that's mixed in with the water and it's mixed in with the pollution. So we have a lot of raw sewage in my district. This is in part because we have a very old sewer infrastructure here, where we have the old-fashioned version where once the water rises to a certain level during a rain event, it just kind of like coughs back whatever's come in. So one of the best methods for this is to and that have worked in other cities like Philadelphia and Baltimore is to change the way that we charge for water. So right now in New York City, you only pay for potable water, which means that if I if I have a home, I'm paying probably as much for water as if I have a gas station with one bathroom. I might even be paying more than that. But the gas station has a huge amount of pavement. They have gas that's spilling onto the ground. And so when there's a rain event, all of the water that's going into the sewer is collecting some of that debris, and it's actually generating much more wastewater than the house is if the house has a garden and is actually, next to some other places that have permeable surfaces. So what separating these two costs does is we can now say, and what would be enabled through this bill is it would allow a city to say, we are going to charge not just for the water that you use, but also for the surfaces that have runoff that are going into the sewer system. This bill is to really clarify that this is something that cities and municipalities can do. But what it really will allow for is for cities to offer incentives to people who have a lot of non-permeable surfaces to green their land. And this is a really good generator of revenue that we can then use for stormwater infrastructure.
Right. And it'll also help capture, we're getting a lot more rain and a lot more storms, and it'll help to capture the water, which will also take some stress off of the sewer system.
Exactly right.
So it's a great bill. Before we get into the All Electric Building Act, I wanted to talk about another bill that I believe is currently in committee, and that's the A275. And it's the one that directs the New York Energy and Development Authority to establish a Ride Clean Rebate Program for electric bikes and scooters, which I know is really important for Brooklyn. We have a lot of bikers in Brooklyn.
Yes. And we give incentives to folks who are purchasing cars, electric cars, other kinds of vehicles, and there's never really incentives to use bicycles. And e-bikes are really a revolutionary item. They make cycling possible for such a wider group of users. So we want to be pushing people to use electric battery kind of multimodal transportation. So cycling is really popular in my district, and it's been an advocacy group that I've been a part of for a long time. Another big piece of my agenda as a elected is to also focus on street safety and making sure that multiple users can safely use the street, from pedestrian to cyclist to car to bus. So
thank you for being such a strong advocate for our very bike and pedestrian oriented Brooklyn and New York City too.
Yeah.
Can you briefly give an outline of these bills are in committee? Can you give us a Civics 101? So a bill gets introduced and you're the sponsor of the All Electric Building Act.
Right.
And what happens after you sponsor a bill?
So I put together the language and the concept. We put it in and it gets a bill number, and then it is assigned to what part of the law it would modify. So it might go to the corporations, like the water treatment bill goes to the corporations committee, because that would impact that part of the law. And then there has to be a push for it to be moved out of committee. And that's really where local advocacy comes in. And we really do this through, coalitions like the ones that 350.org is a part of. And we also do this by reaching out to interested parties. So actually, New York City's environmental department has been very interested in the wastewater bill because they would like to have this kind of permission to change this structure so they can have money for resiliency planning. So we reached out to them and they helped to support it. And then having constituents from different folks' districts calling their rep and saying, I would like you to co-sponsor this bill. Adding your name to a bill saying that you are a co-sponsor means that you support what the bill is for, so much so that you want your name on it too. And that is a critical piece because that's when you get people interested in the bill, learning about the bill, and awareness. Because there's thousands of bills bopping around in the Capitol, and you really have to bring the attention to the bills that you want to see pass. So my team really gets it out to those of you guys who are organized already, and then you all bring in the advocates who are passionate and want to see the change. After it goes through committee, then it goes to the floor. But usually by the time in the state government something goes to the floor, there's agreement that the Democratic Party is going to support it. And because we have a supermajority, we don't really need more than that to get a bill passed. So it's this time when a bill is in committee that is the most critical for community organizing and for speaking out about a bill. They will be able to plug you right in immediately into this work.
That's it for this episode of Climate Check, Stories and Solutions. Thanks for listening. To subscribe, go to climatecheck.fm. Climate Check is a production of 350 Brooklyn in Brooklyn, New York. Stay up to date with our releases by following 350 Brooklyn on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Our production team is Alyssa Kropp, Barbara Schroeder, Bryn Fuller-Becker, that's me, Eva Dean, Peter Kamali, and George Ostro. The music you heard in this episode is from Blue Dot Sessions. 350 Brooklyn is a local affiliate of 350.org, a worldwide grassroots climate organization. Join us in finding solutions to counter climate change.